Hey guys, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, please hit the like and subscribe button. Today it's gonna be kind of a catch-up story because I should have done this a long time ago. It's Luka's birth story. Obviously, Luka is not, brand new anymore. He is about 2.5 months. So it's better late than never, but a lot of people have been requesting this video, so I figured that I'd sit down and do it, and especially while he's sleeping. I feel like if I tell this story, it has to be about the whole birth week instead of just May 30th, because the events leading up to it are you can't take him out of it. But the Sunday before we had him, I ended up having a really bad headache and I was just feeling horrible. I was super just lightheaded, nothing was feeling good. I was just feeling super off, and I know that preeclampsia is a really big issue, and up to that point in my pregnancy I've been super healthy. We were super doing really good, but I just had a really bad feeling about it. So we ended up going in to the hospital. They hooked me up to all the monitors. We were there for about an hour and a half, just monitoring the baby, me, all the good stuff, and we ended up being discharged with the diagnosis of a concussion. And yes, I got a concussion when I was 39 weeks pregnant, and it was a complete accident. I ended up getting a concussion while bouncing on my birth ball, and completely by accident. Colton really wanted to be super sweet and come give me a hug while I was just bouncing on my birthing ball. But in the process of walking over to me, he ended up tripping over the coffee table, stubbing his toe, going down to reach for his toe, falling over onto me and knocking me flat off of this yoga ball and onto the floor. And I was just so pregnant, and he tried really hard not to fall on me and on the baby, and so I ended up whacking my head. So I had a concussion. That's how we started our week, was in the hospital. 2 days later, this is over Memorial weekend, 2 days later, we're swimming in the swimming pool. Everything's going fine. I'm trying everything to get this baby out, because over in North Carolina, it's just so humid, so hot at this point in the year that you just want to die. You just are a puddle of sweat, and the humidity is sticky, and I was so big and so pregnant that I just wanted this baby out of me. I didn't care how much pain I was gonna be in. I didn't care when it was gonna happen. I was kind of ready or not, I want this to be done. I want to be over it. I'm so over this right now. We were swimming in the swimming pool and doing absolutely nothing. I was just floating with my huge belly, and Colton was just swimming with goggles. And all of a sudden he just says, "Wow, my back really hurts." And so we decided to leave the pool because his back was hurting, and obviously it's no fun. He progressively got worse throughout the evening and ended up being in bed most of the evening. By the end of the night, he was in so much pain with his back that he couldn't stand up, he couldn't move, he couldn't, do any, even roll over in bed, he couldn't do. We ended up in the ER that night, and we spent most of the night in the ER. We ended up having to go home with the doctor saying basically just let it heal by itself. The next day, on Wednesday, Colton was still very much out of it. He didn't go to work that day, and so that night for dinner I was trying to be really sweet and really nice, and I made him a good dinner. And while I was eating my dinner, I just felt this kind of a little pop, but it wasn't enough of a pop for me to really be oh, that's weird. But I just felt this little pop, and then I felt a gush. And for me, I deep down knew that it was my water, but I really was not willing to accept the fact that my water had just ruptured or broken, And so I played it off as I'd like peed my pants because I was not willing to go to the hospital for the third time the week. And so I ended up excusing myself from the table, and I went to the bathroom. And because I honestly, I really did think that I had just peed myself. So I went to the bathroom and I ended up having to change my underwear and my pants and because they were soaked. I really thought that it could have been my water, but I didn't want to go into the hospital, so I was like, maybe I just peed myself because, let's be honest, I had sneezed and peed before, so I was not a stranger to peeing my pants that pregnant. But I told Colton about it and I said, maybe that was my water breaking. And he was like, well, do you feel it now, or are you in pain? Are you contracting? And I was not in any pain at all. I was not contracting. Nothing else was coming out. So I was like, you know what? Like, it's whatever, it's fine. And so we ended up just going to bed that night. The next morning I had my 40-week doctor's appointment. So I was gonna have them test me then or talk to them about it then. I didn't want to go in because it was, getting to be the evening, late at night again, and I was just over the hospital at that point. The next morning, I got up pretty early in the morning to get ready for this doctor's appointment, and right when I sat up in bed and then stood up, I felt another gush, and I sprinted. This huge pregnant lady sprinted to the bathroom, did not make it to the bathroom in time. By then I was knowing that I couldn't be crazy. I couldn't have peed myself twice like that. And so I knew that something was happening. But again, we were going to an appointment, so I was like, might as well just keep this appointment in half an hour. And so we get to we get in the car. I'm feeling great. I'm feeling fine. I'm just huge and pregnant. And so that's the only thing that I'm really uncomfortable with. And so we head to the hospital, which was where my OB appointments were. And we get into our appointment, and they were gonna do a pelvic exam and see if I was dilating, effacing, anything was happening. And so I was like, awesome. So I took off the bottoms, put a sheet on. And while the doctor walked in, I was like, hey, could you check if my water broke? I don't know, but I think something happened. And the doctor was like, okay. And she took out one of it's a little looks like a pH strip, honestly. And it just, you dip it in the fluid, and if it's blue, then that's amniotic fluid. If not, I peed myself. And that would have been really embarrassing, not gonna lie. So she gets down there, she does a pelvic exam, and that was very uncomfortable. It didn't really hurt, it was just more pressure. And honestly, this little lady got up there and shoved her hands right up in there. And I was really impressed on how well she did it with how small she was and how big I am. And she got up in there and she was like, oh honey, you're about you're at a tight 3. And if you don't know, you have to be a full 10 centimeters, and I was at 3, barely. And she was saying I was at a tight 3, and I was about 75% effaced. And she went and did a pH, the little strip test, and she was like, oh honey, your water is broken. When did your water break? And I was like, I think last night. And so because you have a certain timeline to when your water breaks to when the baby needs to come out, because bacteria can come in and then it's just no bueno. It's all over. I had no idea what was going on. I was just so freaked out and already exhausted from the week that we'd had. And she was like, you're not leaving this hospital. We were not prepared to walk in and have a baby. So I ended up getting walked straight upstairs. I was escorted upstairs. We passed triage. I was feeling great. I was feeling fine. My husband had to go home and get our bags, and I had honestly not even finished packing my bags. So I had to text him a list of stuff to put in the bags. He ended up cleaning the apartment, and which was really awesome of him. He didn't need to do that, but he cleaned the apartment, got our bags, and he kind of took a nap. just kind of rested for a little bit. And all while he was doing that, I was getting up in my room, getting changed over into like a gown and getting my IV started because I was going to have to be induced because I was not spontaneously going into labor. Nothing was progressing past that. The anesthesiologist came in and started talking to me about, you know, like pain relief and telling me about the epidural and all that stuff, and had me sign all the forms, and just in case I needed one, because I was really trying for an unmedicated birth. And yeah, that went well. I was trying for an unmedicated birth as far as I could, at least. And so we had like people coming in prepping the room, we had doctors talking to me, I was signing all the forms to be admitted, I was, you know, just so much was going on. And in that time they were getting my IV in, and they ended up finding one in my arm. She punctured my skin and blood shot across the room. Well, not the room, blood shot across the bed. And she was like, oh, that's a really good vein that I hit. And I was like, well, good, because we're getting this party started. And I had to be on the IV for like a certain amount of time before they could get the Pitocin going. But they were super worried because my water had been broken for over 12 hours, that they were worried I was going to have to go in for an emergency C-section because the baby was just not coming. And so by that time, like, we were just waiting for the Pitocin to get started, and Colton got back up to the room. He got our bags in there, and I was bouncing on a yoga ball to like try to open me up, try to like get this baby to like convince him to come on out. Colton, in all of his wisdom, was seriously like, it's not a birthday without a pizza party. So he ended up calling Domino's while we were in the delivery room, and he ordered pizza to our delivery room. Like, I was eating pizza and they started my Pitocin drip, and I kid you not, 2 minutes after the Pitocin drip, like, they started off at the lowest level possible. 2 minutes afterwards, the first contraction hit, and I, like, the pizza was half gone, and I was like, I will throw up if I smell pizza right now. So I had to just like get rid of that, and the Pitocin started kicking in, and I had mentally prepared myself for, you know, like the contractions that everyone talks about, like in the front, your belly contractions. And my contractions, for whatever reason, was completely in my back. And everyone talks about, you know, like in your belly, like you breathe through them. We'd taken Lamaze classes to like help me like prepare for this, like help me like think through it. And we had never talked about like back labor whatsoever. So I was completely unprepared. With the contractions in my back, I was in so much pain that I could not move. I was paralyzed. And after a few contractions, I was breathing so hard that my throat started to get dry because I was breathing in my nose and out my mouth. And I started getting a sore throat. But after a few of those contractions, because the contractions, when they started, they were about 2 minutes long and then every 2 minutes apart. And they were hard and strong. I had no ease into it. It was just, bam, you're going. And so, like 2 of the contractions in, I was bouncing on this yoga ball to try and like help things go, and my water ended up breaking the rest of the way. And it was such a crazy feeling because it's basically like you're peeing yourself. Like, there is no stopping it though. And my body, I saw the water coming out and my body instantly like told itself to stop it. And so I just tensed up, and I just really could not relax, because the more that you relax, the more your body can take over, the more that it can just come on out, and like it'll be done way faster if you can learn how to relax your body. And no matter what I told my body, no matter what I thought, like anything, I just like kept tensing up and kept tensing, and it made it so much worse than it could have been. And so after, you know, like my water broke, I ended up getting into the bed because I was so paralyzed. I could not even, I wanted to walk around, but because I was hooked up to an IV, I couldn't really move. I was basically just watching the monitor of all my contractions going up and going down, and it was just so miserable. But I powered through that for, I want to say, about 3 or 4 hours. But at that point in time in my life, I did not look at the clock. I was not aware of what time it was. We were just going, and my eyes were shut so tight. And you know, in the Lamaze class, Colton had learned how to like try to reassure me and try to rub my back or something, to relieve stuff. But at that point, he was, I don't want to say this, but he was kind of useless. I was just powering through it by myself, and I do not think I've prayed so hard in my life. And I have no idea like how I even got through that. And so a few hours passed with me going through back labor like that. The nurse, first when I got there, she'd walked in and she'd started my IV, but that day there were 14 other women having babies in the hospital with me. So obviously, like, her hands were very much full, and she was like all over the place. So I did not see her. I probably saw her twice in her whole shift. And so I was left to my own devices and my own coping mechanisms. And so a few hours after like everything was going on, the nurse came back in and she asked like how it was going. So I knew that if this labor was gonna be a very long labor, that I was not gonna have any energy to push when it came time to push. And so I asked for like all the options of like pain relief, and I didn't want to go like as extreme as like the epidural at first. And so I opted to get the IV medication, and it was like 2 parts. One was to basically like knock me out and like make me super loopy, and the other one was for like nausea. Both of them worked very well and very effectively. So the nausea like was super awesome. Like after that, because I was super nauseous, I didn't throw up, but I was wanting to. After that came in, like I was totally fine. But the second one completely knocked me out. Honestly, it didn't do anything for the pain other than the fact that it knocked me out so bad that I was incoherent in between contractions. That medicine it lasted about 2 hours until it wore off. And during that time, if I was not in a contraction, I was asleep, but it was not like a peaceful sleep. It was very hard and very uncomfortable. All right, so Luka actually ended up waking up and he needed to be nursed. And so we did all of that, and he's now playing on his playmat. Completely happy, he's totally fine. Going back into what I was saying though. So I had the IV and completely knocked me out. Like I was so out of it that I had no idea what was going on around me. I had nothing was like making sense to me. And so I was so asleep throughout in between the contractions that I wouldn't have time to start breathing for a contraction, and I would wake up from the weird sleep in the middle of a contraction, and I had no idea where I was. I didn't know how to breathe. I'd forgotten how to breathe because the pain was so intense that I was just floundering, and I was so caught in it, and I was just struggling so hard that by the end of the cycle that the medicine was, I was just done with it. I did not like what it did to my body. I wanted to be way more awake and way more in the birthing process and in the labor than what I was able to, because during it I was so passed out that, Colton would try to talk to me and I would not even move or respond to him. So after that medicine wore off, the pain came back, like all the way back, and I decided that it was time for an epidural, and it really crushed me. I did not want an epidural. very disappointed in myself, and I was very disappointed that I couldn't go through the whole process without help. Even though, you know, however you have your baby, C-section, medicated, unmedicated, you know, in a hospital, at home, all of it is hard. All of it, you know, has its own little things, but I was very disappointed that I couldn't, you know, cope through everything how I should have. But I was basically doing it by myself, so I feel like I did okay. We have, just ignore Luka and his little noises because he's playing and he's fine. He's making such happy little noises, it makes my heart melt. So there was an anesthesiologist and at the hospital, and their main purpose was to give epidurals to women in labor. So I didn't have to wait at all. I had to wait for someone else to get their epidural, but that was it. And so he came in and he got me sitting up. It was so wild how it happened. I was so scared. I think I was actually more scared of the epidural than I was of like anything else. And he ended up like getting me all prepped, like getting me taped off on the back. And I had Colton in front of me, and I was holding on to his hands, and I was squeezing them so tight during contractions that Colton was actually like, dude, like calm down. And I just could not, my body physically could not calm down, and it was slowing down my labor more than it was helping anything. During a contraction, that's when he gave me like the numbing shot, so I did not feel the shot at all whatsoever. And then during the next contraction, because they were still 2 minutes apart, during the next contraction, that's when he put in the epidural, and it didn't hurt. It felt like a bee sting, you know, like when the needle went in. And then I just felt pressure. I felt so much pressure, and honestly the pressure was the uncomfortable part. It was just so uncomfortable. It didn't hurt, it was just uncomfortable. And then after he got it in there, he stopped and was like, you know what, I really don't like that. And so he took it out, and I was like, bro, are you serious? We have to do this again? And so he moved the epidural a little bit, and we went through the entire process all over again. And I was just kind of like, I was in so much pain that at that point, I did not care. So he got the second one in, and it was it was effective, it worked. And which I'm really glad that he, you know, and all the wisdom that he had looking back on it, he took it out and then redid it right then and there. So it worked, and I didn't have to keep going through it without it. I really wanted to feel as much as I could with the epidural. I really was still struggling with the fact that I had to get an epidural, and so I did not press the button. I just was so like, don't do it. And so I was back in bed, and I felt my legs go numb. But during the process, the left leg went more numb than the right leg, so I could still feel contractions on the right side, but the left side was completely numb. And that was so weird feeling. And just to get both sides numb, I clicked another dose, and it was so weird because like I could feel the medicine going inside my body, and that was just crazy. And because it was cold, it was because I could feel the cold going down my back and into my body, and it was just kind of ugh. That was effective, and it helped my right side get numb, but I felt contractions still, but it wasn't the absolute I'm gonna die contractions. It was more of like, this is very uncomfortable, I need to stop and breathe. I did not want to ask the doctor to be checked, because if I did ask the doctor to be checked, I probably would have asked them like every half an hour. I just wanted to see. I'm the type of person that wants to know exactly what's going on, when it's going on, and I just want to know everything. With the situation that I was in, and that my water had already broken, they didn't want to check me more than they had to, because they didn't want to introduce bacteria into my body, into Luka and like everything going on. So a few hours after the epidural, that's when I started feeling pressure, and I started feeling kind of like my body knew that it was the urge to push. So I called a nurse in and I asked her to check me, and she checked me, and I think it was only like an hour or two after the epidural, so super shortly after. And she checked me. I remember I had like walked in at a tight 3. She checked me and I was already at an 8 going to a 9. And she was like, dang, that worked really fast. And I was already 100% effaced at an 8. And I was so excited and so relieved because the end was in sight. And honestly, like at this point, I'd only been laboring for like 8 hours. Like it was not that long, but for me, it was an eternity. It was so long. It was so uncomfortable. My goodness. The epidural did what my body couldn't do, and it relaxed me. And that is what made all the difference. I am absolutely positive of it, because if it was just me, I could not relax myself. And I feel so terrible that I couldn't, but my body just was so tight and tense that nothing was gonna come out of me. So the epidural really helped me just to open up, to be able to be okay with it all. After she checked me, half an hour later, I was feeling pushing again, and I was feeling the need to push again. And so I called the nurse in, and by that point, like, it was a new nurse. I'd never seen her before, I'd never met her. And I asked her to check me again, and she checked me, and I was at a 10, and I was fully effaced, fully dilated, and she was like, honey, we can start pushing. And I was so excited and so relieved that we could just push. And so this nurse, I didn't know, but like the nurse was the one that helped me push like the entire time. And only up until like I was cramped, like the baby was coming out of me, did like a doctor come in. I started pushing about 9:20 p.m. So from, like 11 in the morning until 9:20 p.m. I was laboring, and I was in active labor the whole time. So then I transitioned and I went into pushing, and she grabbed my left leg, Colton grabbed my right leg, they pulled me on back, and she was like, okay, you gotta push like you're pooping. And I was like, okay, if I poop, don't judge me. And I think I was more nervous for Colton to see me poop than like the nurse, because the nurse sees that all the time. But I was kind of like, I'm sorry, this is just so much going on right now. I pushed so hard, and I was trying to do everything I could to get this baby out. And I've heard of, it just varies of how long you can push. And I was just wanting him to come out. And so I was pushing as hard and as fast and as I could. But he would come down and they could see his head. And then after the contraction and I'd stop pushing, his head would go right back up. And so I fought his head coming down for 2 hours. I was pushing him. They gave me oxygen so that I could keep my oxygen levels up so that the baby wasn't in more distress than he had to be. And it was so crazy. Like during when I was pushing, my contractions slowed down. So the contractions were about every 5 to 10 minutes apart. And during the contraction, I would get such an insane urge to push. And usually they tell you like 3 pushes per contraction, but I wanted him out so bad that I was going 4 pushes every contraction, because I was just so done with it. And they have you push, and then they count to 10, and once you get to 10, then you can like let go, and then you can get right back into pushing. And it is so crazy because it takes so much energy out of you. You're focusing so hard on pushing that you don't breathe, and then you take a huge breath, and then you're back into pushing. And then after the contraction's over, you're like, my oxygen mask was back on, and I was like, breathing, and like, I just felt all over the place. And Colton was trying his best, but at the same time, I don't know why. At the same time, he was holding one arm was holding my leg, the other arm he was like texting his family or texting my family saying, she's pushing, and just giving them updates. And I was so mad. I was so mad at him because I was like, Colton, get your face out of your phone. Like, I am birthing your child. Come on, man. But at the same time, I was so tired that I couldn't express that to him because that was just way too much energy to say those words. So I was just frustrated at him the whole time, and I couldn't express why I was frustrated because I was trying to breathe and not die. During that time, you know, I just kept pushing, kept going. 2 hours later, so like 11, okay, so a little less than 2 hours, like 11 o'clock rolls in, and I'm crowning, and the ring of fire is real, and I'm feeling it, like even with the epidural, because the epidural had started to wear off at this point. I was feeling stuff going on. I could feel when contractions were coming. I could tell them when contractions were coming, and then I could push. And so most of the time with an epidural, you don't feel contractions. You don't feel when you're supposed to push. And so the nurses were super surprised that I could feel that. So 11 o'clock rolls around, and the nurse decides, she's like, okay, girl, like, you are ready to have this baby. I'm gonna go get the doctor. And I don't know if like how in the civilian world it really works, but on a military base, like at a military hospital, during my OB visits, I didn't see the same doctor once, and I didn't know who was gonna deliver. He's so cute. I didn't know who was gonna deliver my baby, and so I literally met the woman that delivered my baby as she was walking in, putting on gloves, putting on like everything, and like getting up in me. And she was seriously up in me, checking me out, introducing her, like we were introducing each other while I was like pushing this baby out. It was crazy. So I had a lot of people stirring up there, but at the same time, I just did not care. I was wanting this baby out of me, and I was, the more the merrier at that point, whatever. Everyone had seen me. So didn't matter. She got up in there, she was trying to, you know, flip some stuff around, get him out, going out faster. And like 20 minutes after that, at 11:20, he was out. Like, I pushed one more time, his head came out. The next push, I like half tried, he was all out. And it was wild. It was crazy. It was so fast, and he was telling you how excited he was too. They put him on my chest, and the entire time I tried so hard not to cry because crying is just took so much more energy out of you that I did not have to give. And when they put him on my chest, like tears just started coming. Oh my goodness, he's so vocal. He just wants to tell a story too. But they put him on my chest, and the tears started coming then, because I was so relieved that it was done, so relieved it was over. And that's when Colton decided that, you know, right then and there, he should call the family and say, like, he's here. And so he texted everyone, like sending them Snapchats, you know, updating them all. He just laid on my chest, and I looked down at him, and he had the biggest cone head, like, because he was stuck down there for so long without water that his head was so cone shaped. He looked almost Asian, because I don't want to like offend people, but like he looked almost Asian, and I'm very white, and it's so cone head. He had this super butt chin, and I don't have that. And so I looked at him, and the first thing out of my mouth was, where did he get that chin? Come to find out, it's from Colton's side of the family. But it was so just the emotions in that room of just how chaotic everything was. And I was still stretched out on this table, and I, you know, had to still deliver the placenta and everything, and I had to be cleaned up and stitched up, and you know, the family's already trying to call us, and Luka's on my chest, and Colton's looking at him like, that was just inside of you, wow. And it was so wild. And afterwards, they took Luka, and they got him cleaned off, they measured him, they weighed him, Colton cut the umbilical cord, and it was just so, we don't have good videos of it, and I'm really sad about that, because if I wish I could have like done one thing differently, was to get like, I wish I could have gotten a birth photographer and just someone to, you know, take pictures of both Colton and I and Luka and the process that we went through. I was so ready to, you know, just, you know, everything had just come out of me, and I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so gross. Like, I just need a second to feel normal again, you know? And the nurses were talking to me, and they were saying, you know, honey, like, whenever you're ready, whenever you want, like, we can get the epidural out, like, no rush, no, you know, anything. And I was immediately like, okay, get me sitting up. Like, I want this epidural out of me right now. Like, they got the epidural out of me, and as soon as they got it out, I was trucking on my way to the bathroom. I was getting up. I could move, I could walk, and I was getting out of the bed, and I was saying, I'm going to the bathroom. And the nurses were really kind of scared because they didn't know how well my body was going to work after everything. And so they were trying to help me to the bathroom, and I was powering through. I was getting going, and I was like, come on, I'm out of here. So I walked myself to the bathroom, and I felt super lightheaded. I was very lightheaded because of no oxygen that I was getting. But afterwards, you know, I got in a wheelchair. They swaddled Luka up, and we got rolled into our recovery room. And it was just so, you know, after that, I was very much healing and in the postpartum situation. But it was just so awesome to, you know, watch Colton become a dad, watch him and how he, you know, has been figuring it out. And the whole experience was very hard and pretty traumatic. But honestly, I feel like it could have gone so much worse, and I feel like we really lucked out with how everything went. And I never knew that I could have done something like that. It was crazy. I didn't know my body was so capable of all of what it did by itself, and just the natural instincts of childbirth. Whoa, where are you going? But I'm so happy that it turned out like this, and I'm so happy that I have a little healthy boy. If I could tell anyone anything about childbirth, that it's scary, but it's probably the best. It's the best thing that I've ever done in my life. It's the best blind date that I've ever gone on, and I'm just so in love. I never knew how much love I could have. It's a lot of love going on. It turned out so good, and I'm so glad. And now looking back on it, now that I've healed up afterwards, and you know, I'm on the postpartum like journey, I'm just so in a heartbeat I'd do it again, because it's so worth it. Thanks for watching my video, and thanks for supporting me and all that I do. Remember to hit the like and subscribe button so that you never miss out.